And he goes on to describe the fact that the nations will attack Jerusalem at the time of the end, that the world will be at war against Israel. Go to chapter 14 of Zechariah, and notice chapter 14, verse 1. Behold, the day of the Lord comes, and thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee. And I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. The day of the Lord, the biblical term for what we call in the New Testament Armageddon, the time of the end, the final conflict, when he says all nations will be gathered against Jerusalem. Now, as we read chapters 12, 13, 14, you have an amazing series of prophecies. Israel will be back in the land in the last days. There will be a crisis in the Middle East. The nations will attack her, and yet they will call on him whom they have pierced. In chapter 12, verse 10, I will pour upon the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and supplication. They will look on me whom they have pierced. They will mourn for him as for an only son, etc. He is predicting the conversion of the Jewish people in the last days, a massive conversion in which the Apostle Paul said, ultimately in the future, all Israel would be saved, etc. That has never happened in history. And yet there are many that have predicted this. Jonathan Edwards believed ultimately in the conversion of the Jewish people. Many of the Puritan preachers and scholars believed that eventually all Israel would come literally to salvation in the future. There was never the hint of the idea that these prophecies would apply to the church. It's obvious they do not apply to the church. He's talking about the house of David, the city of Jerusalem, the nation of Israel. In fact, he even says in verse 11 of chapter 12, in that day, that future day, there's that phrase again, there will be a great mourning in Jerusalem, as at the mourning of Hadad Ramon in the valley of Megiddo, at Armageddon, etc. There is coming a crisis ultimately in Israel when they are attacked by the nations, when there is a great mourning at Megiddo, when the Jewish people are finally converted to Yeshua HaMashiach, and they realize that Jesus really is the Messiah, their Messiah, and then the incredible promises in the 14th chapter when everything looks like it is going wrong. In chapter 14, verse 2, when the nations are gathered against Jerusalem, the city is taken, the houses are rifled, etc. The residue of the people will be fleeing from the city. Then in 14:3, Zechariah says, then shall the Lord forth. Notice, Lord is in all capital letters. In our English Bible, that means it translates the personal name of God, Yahweh or Jehovah. The Lord Jehovah shall go forth and fight against those nations as when he fought in the day of battle. That didn't happen during the Babylonian captivity. The Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem. That did not happen when the Romans attacked Jerusalem in 70 AD. They destroyed Jerusalem. No, the prediction that the Lord would eventually go forth and defend Jerusalem is yet to be fulfilled in the future. In verse 4, his feet will stand in that day, that future day, upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives will split in the midst thereof from the east to the west. That has never happened in history. One of the leading amillennial scholars of our time, who teaches at Westminster Theological Seminary in Philadelphia, where I went to school, said once to me, if I were going to argue against my own view of amillennialism, I would go right to Zechariah 12, 13, and 14. I'd go right to this passage. He said, I think this is the strongest passage that premillennialists have in relation to the nation of Israel for several reasons. The Jews have not been converted as a people in totality. They have not yet, as a nation, cried out unto the Lord. The nations are attacking Jerusalem in this passage. They are not attacking the church. And ultimately, the Lord must come and defend them. He has not done that in the past. If this passage makes any sense at all, it has to take place in the future, and the Mount of Olives has never split in half. In fact, there is a very nice Arab hotel and restaurant right on the top of the Mount of Olives. Some of you have been there. I've been there. I've had dinner there. I wouldn't want to be there when Jesus comes back. I've said to the owner one time, I hope you got a good insurance plan, pal, because one day the whole thing's going to split right down the middle, according to Zechariah, and I don't want to be here. And he said, well, neither do I. Maybe I go in the rapture first, whatever, leave behind to unsaved relatives, and what all. Maybe so. That has never occurred. That is yet to occur in the future. And then he ends the 14th chapter by saying, the Lord himself will come, and he will be the king. Look at chapter 14 of Zechariah, verse 9. The Lord shall be king over all the earth, and in that day, that future day again, there will be one Lord, and his name shall be one. And then he talks about the fact that the land will be transformed, and that Jerusalem will be safely inhabited in the future. Notice verse 16. And it shall come to pass that every one that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. And then look at verse 20. And in that day, that future day, there shall be upon the bells of the horses this statement, holiness unto the Lord. Even the pots in the Lord's house in the temple will be like the bowls before the altar, and every pot in Jerusalem and Judah shall be holiness unto the Lord. In other words, in that day, Jerusalem will finally become the holy city of God. That has not yet happened. Jerusalem is still a divided city, a contested city today. It is not really yet ultimately the holy city, because the Holy Son of God, the King, is not there on David's throne today, literally reigning and ruling in Jerusalem. These are future prophecies that are yet to be fulfilled. But it is obvious in all of these prophecies, Israel must be back in the land in the last days, in that day that Zechariah said would come in the future. And Israel is there. Fourth thing we see is the retaliation of Islam. It is a religion that is bent on world conquest. The whole goal of Islam is to dominate the entire world. Muhammad told his followers that they were to convert everyone and get everyone to submit. And those that would not convert would still have to at least submit to Islamic rule. In the view of Islam, anything that has ever been conquered in the name of the Prophet belongs to Dar Islam, the House of Islam. And that includes the land of Israel, because the Muslims conquered the entire Middle East from the ancient Byzantine Roman Empire and took possession of it. It is one of their elements of pride in Islamic polemics and their version of apologetics to say, well, we conquered Jerusalem. We conquered Israel. We conquered the land of the seven churches of the Revelation in Turkey. We hold all those sacred sites. Therefore, our religion must be the true religion. For them to lose that little strip of land in Israel is not a matter of arguing over a piece of land about 100 miles by 50 miles, no bigger than the size of the state of Connecticut, not much bigger than Prince Edward Island. We're not talking about a strip of land. In their mind, they're believing we have lost part of the promise that we have received from the Quran, and we must take it back. Now, they also believe that they lost Spain, and they must take it back. but their chances of taking Spain back anytime soon are not nearly as great because Spain is not surrounded by a sea of Muslim nations. Israel is. So their determination is whether we take back Israel, or one day we take back Spain, or one day we take back Serbia and Bosnia and Kosovo, and we destabilize Europe, and we take over France and England, and ultimately the rest of the world. They're on a mission of world domination and worldwide conquest. Now, most Americans were oblivious to that. Most Canadians were oblivious to that until 9/11. And all of a sudden, when those 19 young men commandeered airplanes and flew them into the World Trade Center and into the Pentagon, people said in the North America, well, what are they so upset about? Why are they so angry? And I would remind us this morning, they did that not because they were irreligious, but because they were fanatically religious. Because they literally believed they were fulfilling the will of God. They were doing the work of God. They were attacking apostate, ungodly, infidel enemies in the Western world, and therefore they were fulfilling, in their mind, God's will. As Dr. LaHaye and I did the research for the book, The Global Warning, we discovered a website called religionofpeace.com that categorizes every terrorist attack worldwide, day by day, week by week, year by year, location by location, with the number of deaths recorded. And we discovered that what happened on 9/11 was not an isolated incident. In fact, since 9/11, in the last 9 years, there have been over 7,000 terrorist attacks worldwide in which over 35,000 people have been killed. There have been terrorist attacks in England, terrorist attacks in Spain, terrorist attacks in Indonesia, in the Philippines, in Nigeria, and all over the Middle East. No, this is not a religion of peace. Political leaders keep trying to say that to pacify Muslims. But in reality, it is a cult of death that glorifies death. And the challenge of our time is we are facing a resistance of evil in the Middle East like never before. Ahmadinejad, the leader of Iran, the leader of a nation that is committed to an extremist Islamic view of the Shiites, that says, in essence, if we will try to destroy the rest of the world, our version of an Islamic Messiah, the Mahdi, will come back again and will return and will establish a kingdom on earth, and Islam will control and dominate the entire world.